That's the moment the Party for Socialism and Liberation says was inaudible in the critical incident video showing the police shooting that killed Adam Sykes.
Today we tell Mike Brown and the ruling class that we won't be divided. We've seen these tricks before. Immigrants are not dangerous. Capitalism is.
Happy New Year and welcome to Naptown People's Radio, a weekly podcast brought to you by the Indianapolis branch of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm your host, Danny Abdullah, and I'm joined by my comrade and co-host,
Derek Ford.
We're here to guide you through the pressing issues facing Indianapolis from the perspective of our people, not our oppressors. And as organizers involved in these issues, we're not just talking about the news, we're making it happen. So today we are joined by Wildstyle Paschall. Wildstyle is an artist, producer, author, activist, skater, and an Indianapolis historian. Paschall's work highlights people, art, and issues that often go overlooked here in Naptown. But, today Wildstyle is joining us because, Monday is MLK Day. And in light of this and IUI, formerly IUPUI, canceling their MLK dinner after 60 years of holding it, Wildstyle is going to be joining us to discuss the true legacy of Dr. King and what does that look like in today's society, right? But before we talk to Wildstyle, let's kick it over to Derek for the Naptown Breakdown.
All right. So, in direct response to ICE's cold-blooded murder of Renee Cole Good by former Indiana National Guardsman Jonathan Ross in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the people of Indianapolis gathered all around the city. There were actually multiple protests, the main one on Monument Circle against right-wing terror. And there were literally hundreds of these spontaneous demonstrations put up, which I think is really going to show how, you talk to people who have worked for immigrant rights, decades, and, most people just were not aware. They didn't care. But now that it's out in the open, it's on, people are really starting to wake up to it and become outraged. And facing pressure from the working class and oppressed of Indianapolis, at the demonstration, one of the speakers, one of our comrades was like, what are quote unquote, leaders doing about it? Offering an opportunity for a response. And the response was basically, I'm scared. It was like a non-response. That's typical, right? Yeah. So, so Hogsett was forced to answer, and he said, this is in the Mirror, Indy. To the extent that the federal government feels the need to place ICE officers in Indianapolis, that's somebody else's decision. But it's not something that I'm requesting, and it's not something that I think there's any kind of immediate need in the city of Indianapolis. People are frightened, and I'm aware of that. But people are not frightened. They're out in the streets in the hundreds.
Right.
Is showing their faces,
yep.
So Hogsett shows really just how he and the entire Democratic Party are completely unprepared, and they have no desire to fight back. Recently, the sheriff has been complaining, and there's going to be a 48-hour time limit on ICE detainees at the detention center, the jail, because of underfunding. But if you think about who controls the funding for that? And you didn't need to be doing that in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. So, it just goes to show you, their response just tells us everything, which is basically they're doing nothing, they're not prepared, and they're not going to fight for immigrants, so it's up to us. And you can read the PSL Indianapolis statement on the website. And the other thing I want to just tune people into and related to that is we're gearing up for January 20th. That's of course the anniversary of the counter inauguration, but that's also going to be the next major national day of action where workers shut down businesses as usual to fight against Trump and the right-wing billionaires' agenda. So we hope that you join us in the streets because we're not afraid, even if our politicians are.
First off, that point of people were out in the streets and they're not wearing masks. right? Whereas ICE is always wearing a mask. Like, I've never seen a video of ICE and I can see their faces, maybe like once or twice actually, but still, typically their faces are covered because like they're afraid, as they should be. Yeah. They should be afraid. You're literally out here kidnapping people. You are a criminal, right? Like, you can't kidnap people. I mean, I know that your president likes to do that, but like,
even he can't.
Right. You're not supposed to kidnap people. What are we doing? But like that statement from Hogsett, if we want to call it that statement from Hogsett of like, people are afraid and it's out of my hands. Like, then, you know, I've said this before, not on the podcast, but like, what do you do?
Yeah. And
like, what do you do then? What is in your hands?
Because like, here's the thing too, is what I always like tell is like, if Hogsett could have called for a mass demonstration right then, that could have been his response. You know what?
Yeah.
You know what? They're right. We got to stay in the streets, and everybody, you know, who voted for me, I want you out in the streets this Saturday. You know, he could call for a mass rally, and there would be mad people there.
Yeah.
You know, and it could get militant, but they don't do that. The simplest thing.
No. And I think there have been some, surprisingly, there have been some Democrats, not in Indianapolis, who have like, you know, kind of risen to the challenge. Not really. Like, it seems like it's still for show, but like done more than at least Hogsett has. But, you know, Hogsett and the Democrats in this city, really the Democrats in this state are not doing anything, you know.
No.
And also, I'm going to say here, like, I told this to my husband the other day, but I was like, I don't want to call them right wing anymore. I'm going to start just saying wrong wing, because like every time I say right wing, it like grates a little bit of my brain a little bit. But like, there really is, at this point, there's really no difference between the wrong wing and the left wing, right? Because it's just, all of it is complacency. All of it is just like allowing people to continue to be killed and kidnapped, right? You know, R.I.P. to Renee, but like, she is also not the first person to be killed by ICE, you know?
Yeah. And in fact, the Biden administration detained and deported more people using a particular mechanism than Trump did in his last year in office. Which is insane. Yeah. Right? Like, and I think, I know Biden, and I feel like the same is true for Obama, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but like the Democrats have actually deported more than like Trump has. Oh, yeah. Like, which is, not enough people talk about that. Like, right. It's insane. Yeah. And the amount of people that have been deported right now is like insane. And Obama and Biden did more. Like, yeah. What is happening here? Yeah. Well, the difference is like one says in public what the others are just saying private. Yeah. Absolutely. That's really what it comes down to. Absolutely. All right. And so that is it for our Naptown breakdown. We will be right back with Wildstyle.
What does it mean to be an organizer in Indianapolis? It means knowing our local struggle is connected to the fight against IMPD violence, to the defense of trans rights, and to liberation movements worldwide. That's why the Indy Liberation Store exists. We're your one-stop shop for activists and organizers, now in our new Fountain Square storefront at 1619 Prospect Street. We create and curate the gear and knowledge you need to build power here. Find t-shirts, posters, buttons, and pins that speak directly to our city's battles, and build your foundation with our vast selection of books, from Black liberation and Indigenous studies to theory, local authors, and books for radical kids. This is more than a store. It's a resource for the movement. We're open Tuesday to Saturday, 12 to 8 p.m., and Sunday, 1 to 5 p.m. Out-of-town listener? Explore and shop our entire collection online at indyliberationstore.com. We ship nationwide. The Indy Liberation Store. Wear your values, study the struggle, change the city.
And welcome back to Naptown People's Radio. So today we are going to be talking about Dr. King's legacy. A lot of times, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., his name has become synonymous with the entire civil rights movement. And that movement has has been portrayed as just, another chapter in the unfolding story of constant American progress. And unfortunately, he is rarely remembered for his evolving critique of the U.S. economic system, his dedication to uplifting the poor, and his view that mass social movements were needed to continue to transform society. Russian revolutionary Lenin once remarked, "During the lifetime of great revolutionaries, the oppressing classes constantly hounded them, received their theories with the most savage malice, the most furious hatred, and the most unscrupulous campaigns of lies and slander. And after their death, attempts are made to convert them into harmless icons." And this quote, although said before Dr. King was even alive, is exactly what they have done to Dr. King's legacy and other revolutionary leaders. So when we think of Dr. King's legacy, we should remember him not as just a speaker at a rally or a leader in a demonstration. He was a man attempting to connect the various forms of oppression into single struggle against social injustice. The only way to remove that injustice is to remove the foundation from which it grows. So, during this segment, we're going to remember this leader of the civil rights revolution by talking about, what it takes to build the next American Revolution. And what does it mean to be a leader as well? And joining me today in discussing how to honor the true legacy of Dr. King is Wildstyle Paschall. So Wildstyle is a community advocate and does a bunch of other stuff. That is exactly how he wanted me to introduce him. So that's what I'm going to say. But Wildstyle can get more into what he does if you would like to. It's totally up to you.
Hey, thank you for having me on. Yeah,
I know. I appreciate you for coming on. It was super last minute. I appreciate it that you were like, yeah, I can be there. So thank you so much. Appreciate you for being on NPR today. I think the first thing I want to ask, in your own words, what do you feel is Dr. King's legacy?
I think it gets overlooked a lot, but Dr. King's legacy is getting things done. We've had a lot of Black militants. We've had a lot of Black civil rights leaders. People have spouted out a lot of rhetoric and said a lot of ear-tickling things over the years, but there's not been a whole lot that have gotten things done. And I don't think anybody has been able to, galvanize a movement to actually make tangible progress in America. And, we see that's being eroded right now, but there were some times where things were actually better. And that was thanks to Dr. King and everybody in that era for actually being strategic and getting things done.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's honestly a great point to be made of during that time. There was so much happening during that time. It really wasn't, there's so much happening right now also. But things got done, right? And it was because of course, not just Dr. King, but all the people that were around him and doing that work. And a lot of people who we'll never know the names of as well, right?
Very much.
Dr. King is, he's remembered primarily for stressing, the needs for civil rights for Blacks, but, he constantly fused the concept of legal equality with the rights of workers and the poor. And he frequently pointed to 3 universal problems in the United States, which is war, racism, and poverty. And he became particularly involved in the sanitation workers strike in Memphis, Tennessee, which is where he was assassinated. And at that stage, King was trying to organize a poor people's campaign to address the massive poverty and inequality for all people in the United States. I think as you said, there's a revisionist history when we talk about Dr. King, and it's wild that the Poor People's Campaign is not really mentioned a whole lot. And one of my favorite writings from him is a letter from a Birmingham jail, which people don't really talk about that either. Where else do you feel like revisionist history gets it wrong or maybe misleads people?
The way they sanitize his Black empowerment and they push an ideal that he was a complete pacifist. He did push nonviolent protests, but he also didn't act like that these things don't happen, that riots don't happen. He also was very militant.
Absolutely.
Like I have quotes from the I Have a Dream speech that never, ever get posted. But some of the stuff that he said, like, it would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of Negro legitimate discontent will not pass until there's an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. He said there will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. If you post that and you'd say who said that, a lot of people would say Malcolm X.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm remembering a third grade project I had to do where we had to quote that speech. I'm like, that is definitely not one of the parts that we were quoting in third grade. It's also Indiana, but
same. I mean, we heard some of the speech, but I think I'm assuming most of the copies that they have don't have the beginning parts. It was supposedly problems, air quotes, problems with the stream, so they don't let you listen to all of that where he said that, but the full text, it's very powerful, and it's not all pacifism. It's not all like, well, we shall overcome.
Absolutely. There's I'm a huge fan of Nina Simone, and there's this interview where Nina Simone, she goes and she meets Dr. King, and she, if you know anything about Nina Simone was a little wild.
Yes, yeah.
But she goes and she meets Dr. King, and she's like, I'm not nonviolent. And he's like, that's okay, sister. You ain't gotta be nonviolent. But right, this idea that he was a pacifist, or that he was just gonna that he was just, laying down and letting people just do whatever to him. Right. He was very strategic and when he utilized nonviolence and the ways that, he went about, okay, what is the image that we're trying to portray here? You can have your critiques of that, of course, but to make him out to be this a punk like that.
Yeah, I mean that's really what it is. Like they put his rhetoric up against other black leaders of the time who also did not lead marches. And honestly, when you look at the cartoons that were being drawn about Martin Luther King at the time, they were much more afraid of Martin Luther King coming and having a protest and it possibly turning into a riot than any of the other black leaders that said, let's just go burn it all down.
Absolutely. Why do you think that is?
I think that, Martin Luther King was able to get everybody out on the streets. And no matter what people say about marches and protests out on the street, at the end of the day, you always know there's that element that it's nonviolent now, but it may not be.
Yeah.
If something changes, it may not be nonviolent tomorrow. Like, you don't get on the street. Civil disobedience can often end up into some other stuff. And there's Martin Luther King quotes for that, when after one of his protests, it ended up turning into a riot, after he left. And he said, but it is not enough for me to stand before you tonight and condemn riots. It would be morally irresponsible for me to do that without at the same time condemning the contingent, intolerable conditions that exist in our society. And he put it right back on them. He said, these conditions are the things that cause individuals to feel that they have no other alternative than to engage in violent rebellions to get attention.
There we go. Yeah. I mean, a riot is the voice of the oppressed, right?
And he said that.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, absolutely. And the argument that, Dr. King, for some reason, he's often compared to, Brother Malcolm. But United States still killed both of them.
Yeah, sure did.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't matter whether Dr. King was out here promoting nonviolence or, Malcolm X was out here with a gun, walking around with a gun, right? Like, either way, both of them were still murdered, right?
And they both was wearing suits.
Absolutely.
You
that
know,
part.
If we're going to talk about respectability too, like it wasn't their message. It wasn't the way they said it. It wasn't the way they carried themselves. It was because they were Black.
Yeah.
And they were fighting for Black empowerment and really to end poverty across everything. I think,
Absolutely.
Even Malcolm X, when he died, he was talking about more than just Black empowerment.
Yeah, absolutely. He was, which was terrifying also, right? Like, it's not just about Black people, right? That was when he became real dangerous, right? Like, oh, we trying to unite everybody. Like, okay. Like,
I mean, and when you look at them, I mean, they both, when they really got on, we're going to unite everybody because poverty, Martin Luther King talking about, the Poor People's Campaign and getting the poor whites and the poor Blacks together.
Yeah.
And then he's killed. Malcolm X, he goes over to the Middle East and actually sees that Islam is, all types of other cultures and ethnicities and races, air quotes,
yes.
Involved. And he comes back with a much different perspective, and then he gets killed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've talked about this on the podcast before, but my 6-year-old is, if you can believe, my 6-year-old is a little radical. I don't know where he gets that from, but like me, my husband and I, we take one of my oldest, his best friend to school as well. And, shout out to Lil Vernon. He's learned a lot being taken to school by a black ass family the past year. And he the other day, well, it was a few months ago at this point, but when Black people say the other day, it could have been like a year ago. But he made this comment of like how the United States is like amazing and great and it's helping. And my 6-year-old was like, "You mean the United States of America?" And he's like, "Yeah." He was like, "The United States killed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr." And I was like, "Yo, it's 7:00 in the morning." Like, it's 7. I mean, you're not wrong, but it's also 7:00 in the morning. And I think the irony of the United States killing Dr. King and then giving him a holiday is something that is never, and probably for people who are listening as well, but like that's never something that is like, the irony of that is not lost on me. And I think goes back to that revisionist history that we're talking about today. Right now, it's an interesting time. It's an interesting time, like no matter where you live in the world right now, I think. But, in light of, his holiday coming up on Monday, Indiana University, Indianapolis, formerly IUPY, they canceled their historic MLK dinner, of which they've held it for 60 years, which is wild. I read like Shirley Chisholm like attended one year, right? Like, a very historic dinner, and they've canceled it. What do you feel like that says about the state of, Indianapolis? What does it say about the state of Indiana as a whole, that like this very pivotal dinner has now been canceled?
I mean, I think it's, Indiana as a state laying its cards on the table. When Brown took over the IU board, trustee board, like he's very clear about his racism and he made it very clear that he was going to extend racism across the state in every area that he touched. And IU Bloomington, IU Indianapolis is very much, not to say that they weren't already racist, because they perpetuated their own high level of racism before Brown ever got elected to anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Let's call a spade, right? Like, it's so interesting to think about like the kind of shade that like the South gets for racism. But I used to live in Chicago, and I often think about like Dr. King when he went to Chicago and was like, "Hey, what y'all doing out here?"
Yeah, he was like, "This is just as bad as it is in the South."
It is, absolutely. One of my currently favorite movies is Sinners. And there's a quote in Sinners where I can't remember which twin it was, but says like, really the only difference between like, Mississippi and Chicago is tall buildings, right? Like, and I think that the same, and it's unfortunate that was supposed to be like the 30s, but like, I think the same can be said today, right? There's really, when it comes to the racism, it was a lot more covert, and now it is more and more every day, a lot more blatant. I think exactly what you said, right? Just laying the cards out on the table, like. It was already, I went to IUPUI, that's where I got my master's degree. And it was apparent when I was there. I was like, what is going on here? I came back to Indiana for what? But no, I think that's a really great point. Where do you feel like, we touched on this a little bit, but like there was so much happening during the time that Dr. King emerged. And there's so much happening right now where both times are very violent, I would say. And, and if you agree with that or not, let me know. But
yeah, I do.
Okay. We're living in very, very violent times. And just as Dr. King was, how do you feel like Dr. King was able to emerge and other leaders of that time? Like what exactly was able to like kind of give him the platform that he had to emerge? And like, the civil rights movement wouldn't happen without Dr. King, like, of course he was a leader in it, but, how do you feel like that came about?
Well, he was young. He was 26 years old when he led the Montgomery bus boycott. And he got into the ministry not because he wanted to be a minister, but because he felt that was the best vehicle to help out the Black community and fight for civil rights. So, literally this is stuff that he had been working on since he was a child. And so when the other leaders that were actually about to work, because, we all know in activism work and there's a lot of pretenders and people there just for popularity or
absolutely
power or whatever. When the other people that were actually there for the right reasons saw who he was, this young 25, 26-year-old, they moved to put him to the forefront and put him in opportunities. Like what people don't talk about with the Montgomery bus boycott was the head of the NAACP there was extremely upset with the other pastors in Montgomery. And he was like, look, if y'all won't do anything, get out of the way, and you better support this young man. And he threatened them. He said he would expose them as cowards if they didn't at least give him Martin Luther King the support. And so they brought Martin Luther King in at 26 years old to run this Montgomery bus boycott.
That's beautiful. Wow, I love that. And I think hopefully, young people are able to like take that. Like if it's not for young people, like things are not going to continue to progress, right? And he was such a great example of that. I'm not 26 years old anymore, but like I think back to what I was doing during that time of my life, and to think about like doing like something as huge as like the Montgomery bus boycott at 26 years old, being so young and doing that, and having the ability to do that, right, which was amazing. But I want to point out, like, it took somebody else like supporting him, right? Like it was not just like he's here by himself, he's out here like I'm solo, right? Like it took somebody else seeing that in him and, hey, how can we highlight this? How can we utilize this? As well as other people, including Coretta, shout out to Coretta Scott King. But like supporting him and helping him and, riding with him and, however else that looked at that time.
I mean, his parents, were a big part of that.
Absolutely.
But with that call out to young people, like since I'm older, and now I'm like, it's a call out to older people to it's a call out for the older people to shit or get off the pot.
Yeah.
Like at some point, some of us have possibly overstayed our welcome into the scene, or we're just not as effective because we're scared. We have too much to lose, and that's what happens as you get older, is you you get put in a position where either you have nothing or you have too much to lose. And what the folks did was that they found a young, fresh, authentic face and made him the leadership and followed him as older people. And that's what a lot of us need to do instead of hanging on to whatever little power we think we have or whatever little influence and trying to put down the younger generations because they don't do it quite the same way that we didn't get it done with. So there's a lot to be learned from that situation. And I think absolutely, yes, the young people can do better, but it's also that some of us older folks can do much better.
Yeah, no, I think that's an amazing point, right? I'm thinking about, ironically, right, thinking about like Voice of the Predators, Osily, right now, kind of what's happened with the now president of the city county council, Maggie Lewis, right? But you see it all the time with like the ruling class, right? How they will make room for who they feel like, okay, you're the next person in line. And that's exactly, like you said, that's exactly what we should be doing as well. It's like, okay, who are we lifting up?
Yeah.
Who is next in line? Who are we going to be building up? Because that's exactly what they're doing. And like, not that we should be doing necessarily the same things that they're doing, but like that, like I'm not going to be here forever.
Right? I mean, they bring somebody in to protect the system, and we need to be grooming somebody and putting them in position to tear down the system. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, kind of going back to like, okay, so what's happening today, you know, throwing it back to this era of like where Dr. King came from, right? The overthrow of Reconstruction led to the construction of the new Jim Crow segregation system aimed at depriving Blacks of social, economic, and political rights and preventing any sort of unity between Black and white sharecroppers and farmers, right? It represented a full-scale political like counter-revolution, right? Like folks just got out of slavery, freed themselves, right? I don't care what nobody tells you. Abraham Lincoln did not free the slaves. But like this era was characterized by fascist Klan terror against everyone who crossed the line, right? Like race traders, whatever. In what ways do you feel like we are seeing this today? We've been seeing it play out because what they first had to do with the Jim Crow was create a culture war to tell all of these people in places that it made no difference that a Black man or Black woman being able to have the same rights actually erodes your rights. Yeah, we see that the same today, where they're talking about, trans rights is somehow eroding your right to believe whatever you want to believe in the Bible or something, or gay marriage is eroding your straight marriage, or all of this stuff. From immigration to the whole thing about them taking the word woke and twisting it all around and saying this. They created this culture war during Reconstruction, and it gave birth to Jim Crow, and that's the same thing that we're seeing, is that this culture war has been going on for well over a decade. Yeah, absolutely. And now it's given birth to the new Jim Crow. Yeah,
I mean, I would argue, my last name is Abdullah, and so my husband was raised Muslim. He's an atheist now, but he was raised Muslim, and something that I wasn't like really aware of until I met him, because I was raised Catholic, so I wasn't thinking about Islamophobia. Unfortunately, I was not raised in a house where that was really a thing that I thought too much about. But like even 9/11, right? Like this idea that like, oh, these people who like maybe are a little more tan, they're not as tan as me, but are a little more tan than you are, or have a different last name, or pray a little bit different, right? Like I would argue that like it's more than 10 years, right? This counterculture that has been created. Islamophobia is. I actually just found out we have a comrade who's a history major, and he's like, oh, there's actually a line in the original like Star Spangled Banner that's about Islamophobia, and I was like, what? I was like, no way Islamophobia goes back to literally the beginning of this country, right?
Well, I mean, when you look at that time, like it was Protestant, and then the Klan came off from the Protestant side of things, and so they hated on the Catholics, they hated on blacks, Jews. They didn't spend much time hating on Islam because there wasn't a whole lot over here yet. But I'm sure if there had been more, and I'm sure in the areas that there were, I'm sure they put some energy into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've had that. But I mean, even when you look at the statements that George W. Bush made after 9/11, and people were ramping it up, and he said, no, Islam is a religion of peace and this and that. We would never ever hear our president today say that Islam was not a terrorist religion.
Yeah, no, that's a valid point. I think there was a video recently of I think it was Reagan and Nixon, and
I saw that. Mm-hmm.
Talking about undocumented immigrants, and they were like, well, they should still have education, and I was like, what?
I mean, they'd be called the radical left by Tucker Carlson and Elon Musk and Trump.
Absolutely. So I mean, right? To go to that point, right? That was the 80s, right? And it has been a very drastic change, and I wasn't around for the 80s, but I was. It was
not what it's cracked up to be, but anyway.
Not crack. But it is a very drastic change. The 80s were not that long ago.
No.
Right? Not that long ago at all. And within 40 years, right, we have had such a very drastic change of how we interact with one another. And very reminiscent of this time that, Dr. King was coming up, I think. Mm-hmm. Very people afraid to even have conversations with their neighbors, right? The young woman who was killed a couple months ago for y'all knocked on the wrong door trying to clean, trying to do your job. Mm-hmm. You knock on the wrong door and now you've lost your life, right? There's a very drastic change. I still believe in the people. I still believe that the people, at our hearts care a lot about one another, but there is this culture of fear that is trying to be created right now, and mistrust.
I think it's created. I think one of the things that I hope, if we come out of this, is the naivety of liberals. Mm. They're always so naive about believing that some of this stuff, well, they're not really racist. They're not just really hateful. They just have a different point of view. They have a different way of seeing things. And we're seeing more and more with the ICE raids that as they become more atrocious, that, they had killed quite a few people of color, but when they shot that white woman in the head.
Absolutely.
And there still wasn't any sympathy from some of the people that claimed that they just wanted ICE to go after MS-13 and the gangs and the criminals over here. And so now you're seeing that they're happy, they're cheerleading murder, and that their intention was never that, we have some immigrant criminal activity going on, and that's why I'm supporting this. That was never it.
You're right. You're right. It was never about that. Absolutely. We've talked a lot about where we are today. We even talked about very briefly, but we talked about Bob Osley right on here. We Voice of the Predators, and Maggie Lewis, right? Who I think a lot of people. It's not a shock to anybody who's listening. I know it's not a shock to you. I am not a Democrat, not a Republican either. Very much a socialist. Which one of my favorite Wildstyle quotes is Wildstyle talking about how he doesn't like socialists, but he rocks with the PSL, which is still one of my favorite quotes. But thinking about Maggie Lewis, thinking about Osley, and these Black faces in high places, which it feels like a lot of times, and you tell me what you think, it feels like a lot of times that's kind of the narrative that we have for Dr. King, right? Like that Dr. King was like the safe Black person, right? He's one of the good ones.
Yes, and it's crazy because it's completely counter to what was actually happening, especially towards the end of his life.
Yeah, absolutely, and like you mentioned this, previously, but like this idea that like one, right, like he was not rocking with Malcolm X, even though that's not necessarily true, right?
Yeah,
That's
not really
that's a false narrative. Or this idea that, right, he was a Zionist, which is not true at all.
Not in the current term. Like, I mean,
Right.
he supported the then state of Israel, but when they took the Gaza Strip, he said he expected them to give it back.
Right.
And that never happened. And he died long before this current genocide happened. So I guarantee you he would not. And I remember his daughter Bernice speaking up one time when the Israeli government tweeted out something, and she was like, "My father would never stand for this." You know?
Absolutely. I think, and she does a really good job. Not all of his kids do a good job,
No,
but,
not all of them.
but she does a pretty good job of trying to continue her father's legacy. And call out like, yeah, my dad would not have done that. My mother would not have done that, right? What do you feel like, what are ways that we, and not just like as activists or people who protest, but like maybe somebody who's listening also and they haven't protested yet, or maybe they're thinking about whatever, but like, how can we continue the true legacy of Dr. King?
By being passionate about it. I mean, if you're passionate about it, go get with other people about that, but also be strategic and understand that you can't walk this path alone. You know, like, and he didn't walk this path alone. I think that's kind of part of the revisionism, is that we often forget about all the other support, including his parents, his family, all these people around the country, other ethnic groups that were supporting him. And so he was strategic, and he couldn't always just go out and just say stuff and piss everybody off at once. But he did manage to get his points across, and, you know, in powerful ways. And I think that's one of the harder things to do when you're passionate about what's going on, is not just to say the first thing that comes to your mind. You know, think about the consequences. But he was very strategic, and that's why he got more done than, I don't know, say the guys that we see are always saying radical stuff today, or people that I talk to on the bus that have a lot of radical stuff to say. It's like, okay, they're not often as strategic as Martin Luther King was about how he said it, who he said it, and when he said it.
Mm-hmm. There's I can't remember who the revolutionary that we got it from, but there's a quote that we usually use in the party, which is like, you know, bold in matter, but like mild in manner, right? Which is exactly what Dr. King was doing, right? Like, you don't necessarily, honestly, I don't usually listen to the loudest people in the room, because typically they'll be loud and wrong. But you know, it's the people who like really are taking the time out to like think through what they're doing, and okay, why are we doing it this way? You know, how can we go about this the best way possible, right? And I think that is a lot of what not just, you know, Dr. King was doing, but like SNCC and, you know, like all the people that he was rocking with back then, and people that he wasn't rocking with also, right? Because like I don't think there's one way to like reach revolution.
No,
right?
It's going to take a lot of people. It's going to take a lot of different paths and people leading people to those different paths to funnel into a revolution.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't see Martin Luther King for as powerful as he was, because first of all, they bury all the spicy quotes, and then they focus on the more benign stuff that he said, and they take them out of context, but also they don't give you the context about how that this was a person that everybody, whether they liked him or not, they had to listen when he spoke, and that they would be pissed.
Yeah.
But he wasn't the person that, when he spoke, they knew he didn't just go out to piss everybody off.
Right.
And people that go out just to piss everybody off don't get listened to for very long.
Absolutely.
And so when he said something, it stung.
Yeah.
It made people uncomfortable. And the only way you can do that is by building relationships and really being, especially with your words, building relationships and building bridges with people to where they want to be respected by you. They want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But also being strong enough to call those folks out when they misbehave, they do bad stuff, and not just stand for anything.
Absolutely. And I think, I alluded to, right, you're not a socialist. And the fact that you're here, you're on this podcast, you're talking to us, we're having a conversation. We've done work together in the past, right? I think that's another way to continue that legacy as well, right? It doesn't, I think it would be ridiculous to think that we're all going to agree on everything all the time. And honestly, I don't want to actually live in a world where we agree on everything all the time. There's some fundamental things that I feel like.
But something bad happened if we all agree. I don't want to be there for that.
Yeah, right. I'm not a fan, even though that's for some reason what people think socialism is. But there are socialism is a spectrum. Absolutely.
I definitely say I'm not a capitalism. This is failing.
Yeah.
This is miserably.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, this is absolutely horrible. We got people kidnapping other people's presidents, and we've resorted to piracy.
It's not going very well.
Yeah, no, this science experiment is failing. We need to do something different. But coming together and trying to figure it out. Right? That's really what it's about, coming together and trying to figure it out. And not just I love that, not just saying all the spicy things necessarily. Sometimes it's called for. You gotta throw it in. Right. But it's, there's a time and a place for it. Any last words, thoughts that you want to impart on the listeners?
I think the biggest thing about Dr. Martin Luther King is just remember he didn't do it alone, and the civil rights movement was going on long before he came of age to get involved. So if you're one of them people waiting for the next Martin Luther King, stop. Get to it now.
Oh man, that was beautiful. Okay. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you so much. And we will be right back after a short break.
There were those who said that we would get here only over their dead bodies. Well, talk. Yes. All the world today knows that we are here and we are standing before the forces of power in the state of Alabama saying we ain't gonna let nobody turn us around.
And we're back on Now Time People's Radio. I definitely enjoyed that interview and discussion that you had, Danny, and I think there's just so many points that are really crucial to remember today. The strategic thinking that went into it, that leaders are sort of, leaders, there's nothing inherent in a person, right? People, movements create the leaders that they need. And how complex politics were at the time, and just breaking down that whole quote unquote Malcolm Martin divide, emphasizing how he, when they gave him the Nobel Peace Prize, he used that platform to talk about militarism.
Absolutely.
So, I think that it was 2 years ago that we were on the streets for MLK Day for Herman Whitfield III, and interviews like that, and that's how we keep the revolutionary legacy of King alive. So, Danny, who gets a Circle City shout out this week?
All right, so this week's Circle City shout out goes to everyone who came out this weekend to donate revolutionary books, and honestly, those who have donated to the Indy Liberation Center at all. If it wasn't for, our donors donating to the center, donating to the party, we would not be here. We would be nowhere. There would not be an Indy Liberation Center. There would not be a podcast. There would not be a bookstore. So, thank you to everyone who shows up for us. Whether it's your first time, donating, or it's your 100th time, even those who are thinking of donating and maybe you haven't yet, you should, first off. But, we appreciate you for considering, and, here's your sign that you should in fact donate, But yeah, so shout out to our donors. We love you.
Yeah, we do. And the thing too that I would say is like, if you donate $10 like today, if you want to come in tomorrow, I can show you literally what your $10 did. Yeah. Because we're not one of these nonprofits that we're paying, we don't get paid to be here. We pay to pay to volunteer here. Yeah. So, it's not like it gets lost someplace or, in some whatever, it's like, no, we that helped us get this chair. Thank you. We needed a new chair, Absolutely. And it's really remarkable how the people have sustained us by, donors of all sizes, but how many just are grassroots, give $5 a month. And that really makes a difference. And
yeah, absolutely.
That's whether or not we have pens, so definitely, I support that. If you want to support, become a donor or sustainer. And if you are a sustainer, ask a friend to become a sustainer. Go to indyliberationcenter.org/support. So a couple things going on this week. On Wednesday, January 14th, at the Indianapolis Liberation Center, we, as in the PSL, are hosting an info session where we'll hear from newer organizers about how they got involved in the movement, as well as seasoned leaders to find out about our collective decades in the struggle. We'll have an open discussion. All questions are welcome. And then afterwards, you can spend some time socializing with like-minded people. So, calm down, take the next step in figuring out how to fight and how we can study, serve, and struggle for a better system and a better future together. The next day is going to be Circle City Sign House Mindfulness Meetup at 9:30. And then between 2 and 4, we have the third session of our Reading Capital with Comrades study group. We're reading chapters 4 through 9, and resources for that are available online. And then, of course, Sunday between 6 and 8 is Emancipatory Motions, the political yoga motion for movement building. So we got routine events here. We got special events here. Hopefully I didn't miss anything, but always go to indyliberationcenter.org to stay up to date. So that's it for this episode of Naptown People's Radio. If you found today's discussion useful, pass it on, leave a comment, or show some love by donating at support.pslindianapolis.org and by shopping at indyliberationstore.com or coming in, better yet, because we got a deal going on. You spend $30, you get 2 posters. The road ahead is long, but we walk it together. Study with your comrades, build with your community, and always remember, theory without action is paralysis, but action without theory is chaos. Once again, I'm your host, Derek Ford, here with my comrade and co-host,
Danny Abdullah.
Stay dangerous, stay disciplined, and stay in the struggle.
We say all power to the people. That means that we are our own liberators. We don't depend on nobody else. We depend on ourselves. We take responsibility for ourselves, and therefore we step up for our organization, those that have proven by their actions and their practice that they represent for us. All power to the people and peace.
Collaboration. We act as if there's a scarcity of rights. If gay people get rights, women can't have rights. But that's not true. A victory for one is a victory for all. As Dan's just saying, And
you talk about people being fearless in the face of whoever there is. They don't care. To the Liberation Center, I would say, this is what we need.